Morning Glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh up in Studio North, which allows me to go down to New Hampshire and attend town halls as I did yesterday when Ambassador and former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley held forth in a meeting with about, 150 people. Morgan Ortagus was asking questions for half an hour. All the national news media was there. And the governor joins me now. Good morning. What do you prefer, Madam Ambassador or governor?
It's Nikki. Those are moments in time.
Okay. Well, Ambassador, I'm going to stick with that because I'm a formal guy. First of all, that was a tour de force, and I'm in Switzerland. I'm not endorsing, but I wish everyone had your background when it came to national security issues. Ought we to have more forums like that where the focus is on America's national security?
I mean, the next president has to not just know about foreign policy. They have to be willing to start day one dealing with our national security and the foreign policy situation. We're going to have issues around the world for at least the next 2 decades, and we've got to start acting like it. We've got to start thinking like it. So this can't be someone that's weak in the knees. It can't be someone who's not sure about what's going on or needs to be schooled up in it. It needs to be someone who knows their stuff.
2 years sitting in the UN General Assembly will teach you about the world. I want to get to your conversation with the Chinese ambassador to the UN about the Uyghurs, but first I want to ask you about your husband because I did not know he had just deployed again. And I don't think there are many Americans in a position to talk about what it's like to be a military spouse, a military child, or a military parent when your loved one goes off for a year.
Well, I am one of many military spouses who start the year-long prayer when our spouses deploy to serve our country. And, last week I dropped my husband Michael off at 4 a.m. with 230 other soldiers. And I'm telling you, everybody should see a group of soldiers like that picking up their 2 duffel bags to load a bus to go to a country they've never been before, all in the name of protecting this amazing experiment that is America. And the idea that they're willing to risk their lives, risk their families, everything else, because they believe in our freedoms and love our country so much. It's a lesson for every American that all of this drama and chaos that's going in our country, what really matters at the end of the day is that we're free. And what really matters is that we remember that freedom has a price. And we've got to do for them as much in this country what they're doing for us around the world.
Now, Ambassador Haley, Vice President Pence has a couple of kids in the military. You've got a husband in the military. Ron DeSantis served in the military. But I don't think people know, or I have not heard any candidate talk about the transition the way that you did. And I sat next to Phil Taub yesterday, wonderful guy, met for the first time, who works on preventing suicide among veterans of the long war. And I really applaud the guy. He's a merger and acquisition lawyer. He doesn't have to do any of this stuff. And he spends all of his time doing that. Just tell people what you said about the transition period, because I think that's so crucial for people to understand.
Well, and God bless him for what he's doing. Hugh, 1 in 3 veterans suffer from PTSD or thoughts of suicide. We lose 17 heroes a day to suicide. 33,000 of our heroes in this country are homeless, and that's shameful. The thing is, a lot of Americans see when, these men and women come back home and they're hugging their families and everybody's excited, but what they don't realize is what happens when they go home. There is a long transition. Many are unable to hear loud noises. Many can't be in large crowds. Some really struggle with the fact that the world moved on without them and they have to go and fit back in. It is a difficult transition that lasts quite a while. And that's why it's so important that what we have to do as Veteran Affairs isn't just about making sure they come home safe. It's making sure they stay safe as they transition and get healthy again. There is a process of getting healthy, and we can't ever stop thinking about that.
My jaw dropped when you told me about the VA policy about appointments, Governor, Ambassador. Would you tell people about that? Because it really is, it's shameful for our country to have spent $7 trillion and treat our veterans this way?
I will make sure that our veterans get treated the way they deserve to get treated. Right now, if a veteran needs a doctor's appointment, just a general doctor's appointment, they have to wait 29 days to get an appointment. Why 29? Because when it hits 30, they can go to any doctor of their choice. So what happens is usually midway up until the 29 days, they get a phone call to reschedule so that it starts all over again. That's how the VA hits their numbers. That's the quotas that they try and work on. And so when you think about that, think about all of those that are just sitting there waiting, many in crisis situations. We need to have where every veteran can go to any doctor, get the care that they need. We need to have more telemedicine so we can deal with these mental health issues that are rampant with our veterans. And more than that, Hugh, I will make sure that if we want to know about the VA and we want to fix the VA, the only way to do that is to make sure every member of Congress has to get their health care from the VA. That's what I'm going to push, because then you'll see our veterans suddenly get taken care of for the first time.
Now, Ambassador, your husband went away for a year. The Army does longer deployments. My son-in-law, and nephew are in the Navy. They do 6-month deployments unless they get extended. The Marines do about 9 months. A year. When you started your presidential campaign, did you know Michael was going to go away for a year, or was that a after-the-fact development?
No, not at all. Not at all. The last time he deployed to Afghanistan, and I was governor. And as I always say, he left me as a single mom governor at that time, and I was the only governor in history to ever have a spouse deployed. Now we found out. But look, how proud are we as a country that we have men and women that will do this. I'm so proud of them. And, when they go for a year, it's like losing your right arm. It's we're such partners in life. But what I also know is that, he's doing what no other country can say that we've got these men and women that will go out and do this. And so we're so proud of him. And, it is the life of a military spouse. And, it's in his blood to serve this country. And God bless him for it.
Now, on the military, you got a question from the audience yesterday from a 6th grader about weaponization in space. And I thought to myself, I wonder how he knows that. And I wonder if he's been taught that weaponization of space is bad as opposed to necessary. You handled it with great care. What did you make of the question, both its substance and that it came from a 6th grader?
I love the fact that this is why we need to pay attention to the younger generation. They are a lot smarter than people give them credit for. And they're not thinking about old wars of the past. They're thinking about what the new wars in the future are going to be. That's why it's not just about land, air, and sea. It's about artificial intelligence. It's about cyber. It's about space. And he wanted to know, what we need to know about space weaponization. And I think, China and Russia are close to U.S. when it comes to space weaponization, and they've tested at least, one weapon that we know of, but both countries have tested missiles that can destroy satellites, that are, working to develop jammers that will threaten communication and lasers, to attack satellite sensors. We have to be very conscious of that. And it's clear that this 6th grader knew exactly that that's the next step that we need to look at, and then that's the future.
You also got a question from a grid professional who's been around the world and seen the Chinese at work on the grids of every country in the world. What's that tell you, Madam Ambassador? We all think about, missiles and submarines and things like that. But what you have to understand is the Chinese has been at war or preparing for war with America for decades. And part of that is they have gone into countries and done little port projects, and then they turn around and invest in different types of infrastructure. Or when a country defaults, they say, you can't pay your bill, give us your utility, give us your military installation. So we have to look at the fact that if you look across the map and you saw what China has invested, it would send a chill up your spine, because they have the ability to control so much of the infrastructure around the world. I mean, you look in Africa and you will see there are so many more Chinese working in some cases than there are Africans. And it is because they are very much paying attention to the electric grid. They're very much paying attention to infrastructure, and they're very, very much paying attention to what it will mean to own the world and own everything that controls it. Now, Ambassador Haley, you are conversant with what they just did in Zambia. I know because you brought that up sua sponte yesterday. I would be accused rightly of asking a gotcha question if I asked people, what are the Chinese up to in Zambia? But when I asked Mayor Suarez about the Uyghurs, and he didn't know it, and he said I mispronounced it, and I didn't, I'd stop beating up on him if he stopped blaming me for the question. You, on the other hand, discussed the Uyghurs at great length, and I would love for people to hear what the Chinese ambassador told you about it.
For your listeners that don't know, the Uyghurs, there are over a million now, Muslim Uyghurs that are in what I call concentration camps in China. And basically the Chinese, they make them change their name, change their religion, sexual abuse, genocide, which we swore never again would we look away from genocide. It's happening right now in China. And the reason no one says anything about it is because they're too scared of China, and that's a problem. But the Uyghurs have been mistreated for many years. When I was at the United Nations, I noticed what was happening. And so when we were having some sort of hearing on human rights, I actually called out China on what they were doing with the Uyghurs. And at an event where all of the Security Council was there, the Chinese ambassador asked me if I would step away for a bit and talk to him. And I did. And he said, I know you mentioned those people today. And I said, what people? And he said, those people that we have in China. And I said, you mean the Uyghurs? He said, yes. And he said, you don't understand the situation. And I said, well, please tell me. He said, they are bad people. And I said, what do you mean? He said, they're criminals. And I said, you mean these are people that have committed crimes? He said, in some cases yet, but in some not yet. I said, so they haven't committed a crime? He said, no, but if we didn't do what we do, they would. And I said, so you keep them there so that you keep them from committing a crime. He said, we actually do good for them. He goes, we teach them a better way of life. We teach them not to commit crimes, not to do things. In his mind, he was trying to convince me that he was saving these people and that these people were bad and they were protecting them from themselves. It's a crazy way of thinking.
It's a crazy way of thinking, but they are also quite determined to wipe out the ethnicity of the Uyghurs. They've gone back, they've dialed it back a little bit because of the criticism at the United States level, but not quite where we need to be. This brings me to my next question, not Mayor Suarez specific, but can you learn on the job as president, or do you have to be ready on day one?
I think that people could learn on the job, but in this day and time, we don't have time for a learning curve. You're going to have to get in there day one and know how we're going to address Russia, know how we're going to address China, know how we're going to address Iran, know that we've got to strengthen our ties with Japan and Australia and India and the Philippines and South Korea, knowing that we have to get NATO together to make sure that not only are we doing what we need to for our allies, but we're looking forward to make sure we prevent war going forward. So it's the learning curve, Hugh, that we're not going to be able to afford. We've got to get in there on day one and show that we can bounce multiple balls at the same time. You also need to have somebody who understands the Department of Defense, and that means know that it's not just about throwing more money at the Department of Defense, and that's how you get a strong military. It's actually going and cleaning up the Department of Defense because it's incredibly bureaucratic and slow. They show so much favoritism to a small number of defense companies, which is why it takes us so long to get our military any of the modern equipment they need. We need to replan what the next future wars will be and make sure that we're up on everything that we need to do and modernize the military. And so it's got to be someone who understands, one, the needs of the military, two, the issues that are happening around the world. And look, I've been a governor. When you've been a governor, you've been an executive. You know what it means to deal with bureaucracy, and you know how to cut through it. And I've also been at the UN. I didn't deal with one country. I dealt with 193. And, this threat that we have against China, this is nothing small. And right now, leaders from both sides have just assumed we'll deal with it later. If we keep that thinking of dealing with it later, China will deal with us today, and we will be lost for it.
You made a full-throated defense of aid to Ukraine yesterday. Would you summarize that? And then I want to turn to Bud Light.
The importance of Ukraine is the fact that any time a freedom-loving country is invaded like that, we should not just look away and say, oh, that's not us. We need to always be prepared to help them. That doesn't mean we put money in Ukraine. That doesn't mean we put troops on the ground. But it means we get with our allies and we make sure they have the equipment and the ammunition to win. Dictators are very transparent. They will always tell you what they're going to do. China told us they were going to take Hong Kong. They did. Russia said they were going to move into Ukraine. We watched it. China said Taiwan's next. We better believe them. Russia said that after Ukraine, it's Poland and the Baltic. That's going to lead to a world war. That's what we're trying to prevent. And so a win for Ukraine would send the best message to China when they're looking at invading Taiwan. It would send a message to North Korea testing ballistic missiles, and it would send a message to Iran that wants to build a bomb. But we have to also remember when China and Russia held hands and named themselves unlimited partners, they were telling the world what they wanted the world to know. And that means for us, a win for Russia is a win for China. And we can never forget that.
Now, Madam Ambassador, yesterday Anheuser-Busch CEO Brendan Whitworth went on the CBS Early Show. I want to play the clip for you. He is asked by the host, would you send the beer to Dylan Mulvaney again? Here is the response, cut 19.
Big social conversation taking place right now, and big brands are right in the middle of it. And it's not just our industry or Bud Light. It's happening in retail. It's happening in fast food. And so for us, what we need to understand is, deeply understand and appreciate, is the consumer and what they want, what they care about, and what they expect from big brands.
So this is a part of why you're getting it from all sides, because I asked you, would you do it again? And people on the trans rights side of things, supporting that community, want you to say, yes, of course, we want that fortitude. And people on the right would criticize you for saying yes. So where are you on the issue? I mean, was this a mistake?
You know, Bud Light has supported LGBTQ since 1998. So that's 25 years. And as we've said from the beginning, we'll continue to support the communities and organizations that we've supported for decades. Mm-hmm. But as we move forward, we want to focus on what we do best, which is brewing great beer for everyone, listening to our consumers, being humble and listening to them, making sure that we do right by our employees, take care and support our partners, and ultimately make an impact in the communities that we serve.
Now, Ambassador, Brendan Whitworth is a veteran of the CIA and the Marine Corps. He's a great American. I do not think he had a great message. What do you think has happened here in this controversy?
I think that they've learned a massive lesson, and I think other companies would be smart to take notice. I mean, if you care about your consumers, then understand you don't have to pick which consumers are favorites. The thing you have to do is get out of politics altogether. We don't want division in this country. We don't want you separating and picking which ones you want to highlight and which ones you don't. You need to be paying attention to who drinks beer, and that's everybody. So quit trying to go and single out certain ones and act like you're the best company when it comes to inclusion. You're the best company when it comes to inclusion. You shouldn't have to talk about it. So, what I'll tell you is right now these companies need to go back to just making money. That's what they're supposed to do. And that means you do a message that appeals to everybody, not a select few, and quit pushing it in the faces of everybody else that don't want to hear about it.
My last question, Governor, has to do with what the Supreme Court might hand down as their first decision today, the Harvard case. And the Harvard case involves my alma mater using race to keep Asian Americans, of whom you are one, out of Harvard. And it's illegal under the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and I hope they get nailed today. What do you think of that policy, that approach? Soft bigotry is what I call it. But what do you think about the Harvard admissions approach, which is copied across the country?
Look, we lived it. My son, when he was doing his college applications, was scared to put that he was Indian American on the application because he was worried that that was going to prevent him from getting into any schools. That is what Asian kids are having to deal with. And so, look, I think there was a time and place where affirmative action made sense. What I think right now is let's go back to living based on merit. I was born and raised in a small rural town of 2,500 people, the daughter of Indian immigrants. We were the only Indian family in that town. I from that small town, became the first female minority governor in history. I went on to become UN ambassador. That's an amazing testament to what you can do in this country. So instead of telling our kids, you don't get treated well, so we're going to give you a step up because of what you look like or how, who you were born from. Instead of doing that, say, look, you could be anything you want to be if you work hard, but you've got to put in the work. And if you put in the work, America will reward you. That's the message we need to say.
Last observation. The fetching Mrs. Hugh went with me yesterday to the event, and she was amazed by your poise and your determination to get through all of the questions that you could. How many such events do you have to do in New Hampshire between now and the New Hampshire primary?
Ooh, that's a good question. We have done 31 so far, and we're not slowing down. You know, it's about touching every hand. It's about getting in front of every person. This is a marathon. It's not a sprint. These national polls don't mean anything right now. We've got debates coming up in August, September, and October. That's when we're really going to start to see things move a little bit. And so, look, I don't believe in shortcuts. I believe doing it the right way, and I believe earning every single person's support. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to make that happen.
You know, Morgan did a great job yesterday, but I did not expect to see a policeman, an electrical grid expert, a sixth grader, many veterans, and the person who just returned from Beijing. Is that what you get at every New Hampshire town hall?
Yes, it is really. That's why I love doing town halls. You get people from all walks of life with all different experiences. And that's why I love the Q&A so much, because you learn so much about what people see and hear. And you get to see not what the news tells you to care about, but what real people care about. And what real people care about is you hear them talk about the debt and how they're worried about it. You hear them talk about the lack of transparency in the classroom. You hear them talk about crime at all-time highs. You hear them talk about an open border that's out of control. And yes, everyday Americans do care about our national security, and they want to know what we're going to do about it. So it's a great forum to see all kinds of people, and, you know, I enjoy doing it. I'm going to continue to do it.
And Ambassador, what is the website for the campaign?
Go to NikkiHaley.com. We need you, and I would tell everybody, go in there and invest and support our campaign, volunteer. We would love to have it, and go tell 10 people to check it out.
Thank you for joining me. Keep coming back, Ambassador, and I'll see you in New Hampshire the next time you're up near the north. Thank you so much.
Take care, Hugh.
I'll be right back, America. It was a pretty great tour de force yesterday, and Dwayne will type it all and put it over at HughHewitt.com. Don't go anywhere.